We've got candidate for mayor Todd Klein back in studio with us. Welcome back.
Good morning, Chad. Good to be here.
Glad to have you back in studio this morning. A conversation that we were having off air that I kind of want to get into to start off the show. You've been obviously knocking on a lot of doors out there, and as many doors as possible. I know. The sense I get from voters out there is maybe a little voter fatigue, or just people who are not paying attention to the local because the national has just drowned out so much. Is that a sense that you're getting when you're knocking on people's doors? Are they surprised that on Monday early voting starts and that they've got to go and select, or that they need to go and select a new city council?
Not necessarily when I'm walking doors. The kind of funny thing is I was walking doors the other night, and it was in more of a tech student area, and I had 2 or 3 people that were kind of surprised. And like, hold on, are you Todd Klein? I was like, yeah, that's me. I'm one running. And they'd be surprised that the candidate was out knocking doors. But I think in general, the people maybe when I'm door to door with them, maybe at that point in time, they're kind of in the zone of just simply a discussion back and forth of, hey, why are you running? What do you hope to accomplish? Here are the concerns I've got. But I think it is a concern that potentially you've got people that are suffering voter fatigue or just tired of politics. And I am too, quite frankly. I'm not a politician. I'm a private citizen that's running for public office. And, I'm going to win this, lose it, or draw based on just simply the issues and being who I am and not getting drawn into politics. And so at the end of the day, kind of what you're talking off air is just people have gotten tired of the national scene. I think people are tired of it at all levels. So what I'm saying to people is, if you're listening and maybe you've already made up your mind for somebody else, I'd like you to listen to this interview. I'd like you to think about calling me at home, 780-3000, and having this conversation. And if you're undecided, I'd like to be the guy that you vote for. Not because you want to be involved in politics, but this is your community, and I'm going to ask you to cast a vote, the poll that counts. I'm not doing any polling, so, I feel good about things. I don't know where the polls are showing us to be beyond that, but the poll that matters, and I think the poll that people want to be a part of, is Election Day. So as a grassroots candidate, not taking big money donations, not taking special interest money, we're running a very grassroots campaign. We're probably going to be outspent by at least 10-1 and still be in good shape. I ask you to join that effort and check me out on Facebook at Todd Klein for Mayor, or simply call me at home, 780-3000, or website, toddrklein.com.
Let me ask you, Omni Building. Do you think we are too far down the road to turn the ship around? Do you think it needs to be turned around when it comes to the Omni Building? What would you do if elected mayor, day one going forward, regarding the Omni Building / Citizens Tower? What changes would you make, or would you like to see happen?
That's a great question. I get it all the time. And my purpose in talking about this isn't to beat up anybody or talking about the past. I don't think my candidacy is just not focused on that. But I will tell you, when I was on the council, before I stepped down, when this first came up, I was saying at the time, if we can trust people to put us in office, we can trust them to decide this issue. It's not a core essential service, and it's also not an emergency. So timeliness wasn't there. The core essential service aspect wasn't there. For all intents and purposes, it should have been voted on by the public. Just to get in the weeds a little bit, what they call a CO, or Certificate of Obligation Bond, as opposed to a general obligation bond. If it's a general obligation bond, people get to vote. It should have been a GO bond. People should have been able to vote on whether or not we want a new city hall. I don't think we need a new city hall. And so the data will dictate at the issuance of bonds where we're stuck with it. At that point, in terms of the debt itself, we may not be able to get out of it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to oversell. I don't want to be in any office so bad that I've got to make things up or oversell and try to – and that's what people hate about politics, over-deliver, you overpromise and you under-deliver. So let me under-promise and hope to over-deliver. We'll get through it. If I'm your mayor, we'll work through a bad situation where we're stuck with the building if that's where we're at. But if we can still turn that into a vote and figure out a new purpose for that, because you're looking at with the debt service over a 20-year period of that building, somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 million, maybe more. That's a lot of money. I believe in taking care of core essential services, water and sewer, about 62% of our current debt load. I like to be able to flush the commode. I like to be able to have water. Everybody else in this community, when I pose that question to, says, yeah, that's perfect. That's the kind of debt we can accept. And we're about 10 years into it, so in about 10 years, majority, 62% of that should start to phase out. But taking on another $100 million for something that's a luxury and something that nobody's really calling for other than inside the building, I just don't think we need it. So if we can get out of it, Chad, I think we ought to. If we can't, we need to work through it and make the best of that circumstance.
If, let's say, City Hall moves to the Omni building, let's say plans are in motion, nothing changes, okay? Mm-hmm. What then should happen with the police at that point? Should police move into the current City Hall, which will be the old City Hall building? Should they stay put and have substations, or should they move and either have substations or not have substations? And what's the perfect plan in your mind?
Yeah, another great question. I think ideally we'd listen to the police chief. He's saying really what is my opinion also, and has been for some time now. We need to put the police in a new building, but it shouldn't be just one building. Usually you make one construction site and it's going to save you money. This is one of those rare circumstances. Well, I think it'll actually save us money to have 3 substations throughout the community, which is also what the chief is calling for, and it'll improve service delivery. So that's my lane in terms of policy making.
So 3 substations.
Yeah, can you get the biggest bang for the buck so that you're saving taxpayer money and you're also increasing efficiency and service delivery? I think you get that. That's the police chief's position. It's certainly my position. And I don't think you want to put the police – because the argument is, well, we've got to have a new city hall because we need a new police station, which is not the case. We simply don't need it for that reason.
Right.
So it kind of all falls upon itself at that point in time. The argument in the past was always, well, if you support public safety and you support the police, then you're going to have to support the Omni building. No, that's not the case. I'm putting the police in an old building. It's not wretched, but it's old. It was a Sears building. I remember as a kid going to see Santa at the Sears building before it was now City Hall. It's an old building. It's not where the police need to be. We need to have the police out in substations. And while I was on the council, we started building bigger fire stations so that we could have, in effect, almost a precinct kind of arrangement. Well, we don't have to go precinct by precinct, but we've already got the police at various fire stations doing their shift changes and doing their briefings and debriefings. It's a perfect arrangement. We need to build on that.
So it sounds like you're saying new building for the police, 3 substations. Where would those substations be ideally?
Well, spaced throughout the community based on expertise of the police chief, but you'd space them roughly in perimeter so that you've got regions within the city. Where exactly would come down to probably the police chief's preference and available property. But common sense tells you space them where you've got the best efficiency. But no, I'm certainly not saying we need a new police station.
Keep the same station.
No, I'm saying you can get out of that building and have 3 substations. And if one of them has to be big enough to accommodate the staffing, that would be ideal.
Okay, so no main station?
Well, if you can avoid it, I think so. I mean, this isn't rocket science. This is just really common sense, common decency, common courtesy at play.
But other cities have a main station and then they have substations, correct?
Right. Well, I can't speak to what other cities have with any precision. But if you can ideally get out of the current building and build in 3 new operations, that would be the preferred arrangement. But it's going to come down to what the logistics allow us to do. If we have to have a staffing or an administrative building, we can come up with that. But there are ways to get out of the current building, which is certainly very old, and we need a new police station. We don't need it yesterday, but we need it coming forward. So we can, with a conversation with the public and using the data and being information-based, come up with a solution that works. And it doesn't have to be a new Citizens Tower or a new City Hall, as they call it, in one big building, now moved from an old building in one part of downtown to an old building in another part of downtown. Part of the aspect that concerns me is we've spent a ton of money, a whole lot of money, on a master developer and all these efforts in downtown, that we've got this tax increment fund that's not really going anywhere because there's just not enough taxable property in that area. So are we working against our cross aims when we continue to put non-taxable buildings into an area that we claim we want to improve? So again, common sense aspect is to raise that question: are we working at cross purposes? On some level, we clearly are. So if we can reduce that by putting those buildings elsewhere, that would be preferred. And that would be the best use of taxpayer dollars.
Let's go ahead and take the break. When we come back, we'll have another segment with Todd Klein, candidate for mayor here in the city of Lubbock. We'll be right back. Back on the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 790 KFYO. Todd Klein in studio, candidate for mayor. I'll go ahead and ask you because it ran during the break there. One of your opponents, the Cedro, has an ad out that goes after you pretty tough. Links you to Victor Hernandez, brings up the whole city manager. This was when Leon Dumbald was city manager. Says basically that you and Victor were in this together in firing her. I think you did vote to have her fired. That both of you made her life basically hell. It sounds like one of the accusations there in the ad. How do you respond to it? I know you've heard the ad, so how do you respond to it?
Yeah, well, not true, but ultimately when candidates are on the fringe or far down, sometimes they start lobbying silly stuff. But ultimately, yeah, not true, and quite frankly, not the race we're running. We're going to win.
So none of everything he said in the ad not true?
Yeah, the notion that I've gone after anybody that knows me knows that's simply not the case. It's not who we are. It's not the life we live. So, yeah, people can say whatever they want for whatever reason, and I'm not going to try to, guess motives. It may be just simply you're down on the polls and you're looking for something as you go into early voting. We're days away, so sometimes you see things go into silly season. But no, we're running a race based on the facts, the issues, and a positive agenda. I've said since day one, if I have to tear somebody down to build myself up, I'm not worthy of the office to begin with, and it's not the kind of race I would choose to run.
You've talked about transparency a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
At City Hall, when the city manager was fired, people weren't told why, and the city council decided not to tell people why. After you were off the city council, the police chief gone, nobody was told why. That seems to be a transparency issue.
Yeah.
How do you and
follow what you're saying.
in that ad says, hey, this is one of the reasons why city manager needs to be picked. We can't trust Todd Klein. So how do you answer the transparency question with that ad and what transpired there when you were on the council?
Yeah, bottom line, I can't speak to anything that took place after I was off the council.
Sure.
I said at the time we ought to release the report. It involved personnel, and that didn't happen. That was my position at the time. Simply release it. It's a public document. Public paid for it. I think you stay consistent. I've said that before when it was the AAG issue where we had millions of dollars that should have gone to taxpayer money that didn't because a prior council had, a situation where it just didn't work out. And same position at that time, and I led on that charge to resolve that and get that money back for the taxpayers, was release it. It's a public document. That didn't work out the way I'd like to see it, but certainly anytime you can have transparency, we should. It's a hallmark of what I worked on when I was on the council, actually just having evening meetings, quite frankly.
Right.
So those kinds of issues, if I'm elected mayor, we're going to actually go outside and do away games. I think once a quarter we ought to be off of that dais that looks like you're on the Supreme Court. It's about 10 to 12 inches too high. And we ought to just simply be in folding chairs in gyms, starting maybe Estacado. Pick any of the high schools, and just simply at least once a month be there. Because who do we work for? We work for you, Chad, the public. So anybody listening, that's the way the organizational chart starts, is public at the top. So we need to be doing everything we can to be as open and as available as possible.
Let me ask you something that I've heard from many listeners about when they are looking at this race.
Yeah.
You talk about your experience as former city councilman. When you were on the city council, LP&L purchased Excel Energy. Mm-hmm. A lot of citizens had a problem with that. Looking back on that, do you wish the city council had not? And I believe you supported LP&L purchasing Excel Energy. As mayor, would you support that again? And is that something, when you talk about conservative credentials, is that something that's conservative, city buying out a private company?
Yeah, you had a company that wanted to get out of the business, and so they were looking to get out, and they sold at a fire sale price, $89 million. Wound up being about $93 for overall when you looked at closing costs on all of the whole bond issuance and everything else. So that was a ridiculously low price. We would have been remiss not to seriously entertain that. And so getting the acquisition in place has allowed us to get in a position to go into ERCOT, which should further lower the cost platform for what it costs to generate and provide energy to the citizens of Lubbock. So any increases you've seen since acquisition were simply because of fuel going up, because of a hotter summer, and those are regrettable. But fortunately, we've been better positioned than virtually any other city in the state in terms of affordable, reliable rates.
But should the city even be in the business of...
Ideally, no. I mean, as I've said time and again at town halls, and we did about 50 of them during my tenure, yeah, I'm libertarian-minded. You're not going to find a council member that's either A, more conservative, or more limited government. And that's just simply look at the history of my 2 terms on the council. So, yeah, for me, philosophically, you wouldn't be in that business. Unfortunately, you are where you are. Given that, you try to make the best of that circumstance on behalf of the public. Beyond that, you look at the results simply because we're in that position that we are currently. You're seeing lower rates for the citizens of Lubbock, which is a good thing.
Well, let me ask you this, because I understand the philosophically being against the government into a private business and buying it.
Sure, right,
but it was a good business deal. But at what point don't you still stand up and go, my philosophy says I've got to vote against, even though it's a great business deal for the city of Lubbock? Philosophically, I just can't do this because it could lead to other things down the road. A slippery slope type of mentality from the entire city council. If I give in on this, who knows what's going to happen in the future? Where do you separate the two?
Yeah, I think it comes down to leadership, right? The easy votes are when you can take the cast the no or cast the yes when you know it's going to not really matter or simply get you out of a tough choice. It's just not the life I live. It means because I've got other things I can be doing other than serving on the council. I choose to serve on the council because I want to represent my peers and I want to get them the best deal possible. So you balance those two. It became very clear to me that that was the right thing for us to be doing. If we weren't in the business, sure, would I make an effort to get us into the electricity generation distribution business? No, but given where we were, it was in the public interest to do that.
Let me ask you this. Back in 2014, you were in favor of bringing together a group of citizens that would study the regulations on payday lenders here in Lubbock. And this is something that the state legislature has talked about and that other cities, Midland has talked about. If a bill or an ordinance was brought to you to regulate payday lenders here in Lubbock even more than they are already regulated, is that something you would support?
Quick answer, because I know we're quick out of time. No. My goal is to create an alternative system, but to have it addressed at the state level where possible. You've got a circumstance where banks are overregulated, so you're looking at about an 11% through a traditional loan method, or 600%, 700%, 800%, 900%. As a Christian, as a person who may be flawed, but who tries to follow my faith, it's wrong to see usury. And so something needs to be done. But it's not more government. I think we can work to create an alternative, and that would be something I'll be focused on. It's something I've worked with churches on in the past. I think some efforts are starting to build.
Todd Klein, candidate for mayor. We'll get you on next week during early voting, okay?
Thank you, Chad.
Early voting starts Monday, folks.